Well, good morning to you. My name's MacPherson. I'm standing on the dock here and we're about to show you Kinami, which is a Pacific Trawler 38, a beautiful old world boat with all the creature comforts. We took it out for a sea trial yesterday and we were very impressed. It's got a top speed of just under 20 knots, but it's a wonderful cruiser at about 10 knots and you're only running the engines at 2000 RPM. So one of the good things about this vessel is the amazing headroom. In the days of my youth I was 6'5", but here I am probably with a couple of inches to spare, which is wonderfully refreshing on boats today. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to climb into the engine room and show you the daily checks that we would like done before starting. So we're in the middle of the saloon here, and what we've done is just lifted the engine panels up, which gives you wonderfully good access to the engines. So I'm going to drop in and just show you. So as you can see, we've lifted the floorboards, but before going in, switch on the engine room lights, which is third from the top there, and that will give you fairly decent light down below. So when you open up the panels, make sure that these are stacked out the way so they can't fall and hurt you. But I'll show you where the dipstick is. And here we are, this is the dipstick. That's it there, and it runs down inside this tube that goes all the way down into the sump. And so if you've been motoring a while, you'll want to take that out at the end of the day and just check that everything's okay. The other thing to check is the expansion bottles for the coolant, and you can see there's one there. Okay, so that should be above the low mark, and I'll just move this out the way and you can see the other one. And there's the other, and that's your two marks, high there and low. Obviously you need to split that and be in the middle. So your daily checks will involve checking the coolant, checking the oil, and at the back I'll point out that and here is the transmission dipstick. And I wouldn't bother with that at all, only if you see any trace of oil that's been spun out of this seal here. If you see any oil or a collection of oil underneath there, then please certainly check that dipstick. Make sure that the level's okay. You have dripless oil water seal here, so the bilge is nice and dry because of that. Now these are wonderful engines. They're Cummins, turbocharged Cummins, and they push the boat along. Okay, so on the front of each engine you can see that they've got a serpentine belt, so very easy and open to check. They should be nice and firm and should not give you more than an inch or an inch of deflection, which will show you that the tension is absolutely right. Now, I want, while I'm in here, point to the battery switches back there, and you can see there are two battery switches, and each battery switch controls the power for each engine. So you've got a port engine and a starboard engine battery switch there. I'm pointing across here to the EFOI 140 Comfort. Basically it's a fuel cell which will help charge up the batteries and keep your boat alive literally when you're out on anchor. So it's like having a little quiet generator, so quite a useful thing to have. While we're pointing in this direction, those are the water strainers for each engine, and you should check those to make sure that they're not choked up. You can see there's a sight glass around there. You can have a peer in and make sure it's not dirty. The other one of course is on the other side. So while out at anchor you can enjoy heat, and this is a diesel fired burner that will give you heat in the cabins and through these vents that I'm pointing at. And you'll notice that there is a fan speed switch above that. So first of all we come back to the control panel here and we switch it on. It's just a toggle switch, and you can see the light is on. Then we rotate this and you'll see the second light comes on, and I usually rotate it all the way and back it off just a little bit to get it started. Now you can hear it's just beginning to start now. It takes a good 15 to 20 minutes to settle, to fire up more. It'll have a couple of times it will fire up and then redo itself. So be patient, and in 15 minutes time we'll have some piping good heat through here. So everything here is fairly self-explanatory. The bottom controls your electronics, and that will fire up your plotter up on the Flybridge. And as it says, the refrigerator, you need that on. Obviously, you have the fridge running. I'm going to switch the electronics off. We go straight on up. There's your holding tank. If you operate that, it does empty the holding tank. Now, it's important to note that holding tanks cannot be emptied in a marine park, at anchorage, or anywhere close inshore. You want to be at least a mile offshore before you flick that holding tank. And it'll start off, and you'll hear the rhythm of the holding tank will be slow, and as soon as it speeds up and starts fluctuating, it is empty. Right you are. This side here is the AC side. Okay, that will give you hot water heat. It will also allow you to plug in your heaters, which in the early parts of the season are very much needed. So essentially we've checked and we've done the oils, we've checked the water levels, we've checked the belt tension, we've had a look at both the strainers to make sure they're clear. We're now ready to start the engine. Now you do have two starting positions. This is the lower starting position, and of course that is the upper. I must caution you, if you start at the lower, when you switch off, you must switch off at the lower. You can't expect the top station, which has similar controls, to switch off. So if you start down here, you end down here. Alright, so let's start down here. You just switch on, give it a little bit of throttle. When it's cold, you want to give it a bit of throttle. You certainly want to make sure that the gear selectors, which are the black knobs, are absolutely in neutral. You can see that there's a little detent there to indicate that. It's almost opposite those two screws. So we're starting the starboard engine. We'll give it a little bit of throttle. Come across here, switch on. And away she goes. That way up, we'll do the same on this side. Switch on, a little bit of throttle. So very simply over here you have a temperature gauge. You will find that in these waters the engines run cool, so you'll find that it won't get much above 160. Voltage, we expect the voltage to be up nicely towards 14 and slightly over when it's fully charged. And your Rev Counter, now we find that your best cruising speed is at 1800 RPM. It's going to give you a decent 8.5 knots, but if you want to get up and go, it will certainly respond, and as I say, give you almost 20 knots. Over here is your fuel gauge. Alright, there's one for each engine. You can see we're just below half the tank. Now this is your engine oil pressure. We have one on each side, and ideally between 40 and 60 pounds. And here you can see the voltage going up to 14 volts. Now to stop the engine, bring it back to idle. Okay, so they're in idle now, and then you switch off. And that's it. So one of the big negatives is getting underneath all those floorboards and putting them somewhere safe, so that if the boat's a little bit rolly or not so steady, they don't fall all over the place. The answer to that is lift these steps up like that, and you've got a hook over here which you engage. That's it, and voila, walk in. You won't be able to stand up very tall, but at least you won't have to lift the boards. You can do a quick check on the water and the oil, and that's really all you need to do. Make sure that the water's good, and you can also check the belts on each engine from here. And so that's fairly painless, very quick. This is the door that gets removed from here to give you access. So, I'm putting it down, just take the weight off the steps, and undo the hook, and then down she goes. We're up in the upper Flybridge. You've got your VHF up here, and you've got your new touchscreen Garmin. Same sort of engine controls as we discussed down below. You've got black gear selection on your port side, and on the starboard side your throttle. Over here is your autopilot control. So you can switch that on and engage autopilot if you wish. And of course a VHF radio is handy right there. So on the port side Flybridge forward locker there are two 10-pound propane bottles, and I would urge you that when you're not using them to switch this off and then switch on, and there is an LPG control down at the galley. To get your cooker or stovetop working, you need to have this switched on. You'll see the light will come on to indicate that it's on. We've switched on the bottles up in the Flybridge, and then we come and make sure that is on, and we come down here and you'll see there's a pattern describing which burner to light. So that's going to be this one here. You just push in and twist, and you hold it and it will light. And it's the same for all. This one here is this one. You press in, and lastly the chap at the top there. That's him. And this of course is the oven. And you have a chopping board built in here for it. Okay, so we have an electric head here. First of all, you have to switch the switch on the instrument panel, the switch panel that says heads. That must be on. The second thing that must be on is you've got to have the water pressure on. That must be on. Head, okay. And then if you come up here, water pressure. Those have got to be on. And then there's a rubber button over here. You just press that, and you'll see that it brings water in. And you'll only get that if your water pressure switch is on. It brings it in and it evacuates it at the same time. So to have the shower sump work, it's automatic because the water will go into a little catchment bottle below the shower, and there's a float switch on there, and when the float switching is high enough, it will engage the pump, which will suck all the water out of the shower cubicle. And that's how that works. So just one switch, you switch on sump. Invert. So this is just a reference of what's happening here. So I want the invert on. I press that, the light is on, and it beeps to signify it's inverting. Now if we wanted to switch that off and get the charge going, we'd hit that and it goes off straight away. And now without any lights you've got a free chance to hit charge and you're on. To open this, you've got a rather heavy steel hatch which needs to be held up with clips. So it's best to go outside and open it from the outside. To open this is almost like a guillotine, isn't it? So you need to come out here, open it up, and hook it firmly onto those two clips so it doesn't come down and hurt you. And then you can open this and you can go up and down as you please. Okay, so here we are looking at the electric Davit system, which is wonderful. There's the lifting hook, if you can see that. There is a hook on the motor which slides into there, and it's quite simply down, it's lower, and up. So, couldn't be easier. So underneath these bunk cushions, in this locker here, which is underneath it, is the separate battery for the anchor windlass, and also the breaker. So you don't really need to look at there, we have it on all the time. It has its own battery, own charging system, so it's a standalone. Power is always at the window, so it can be used and deployed in a moment's notice. Right, so opening up this little locker at the foot of your double in the forepeak, you can see the chain, a handsome pile chain. It's been marked in white, you'll see the white links, and that is every 10 meters or 30 feet, and you've got 250 feet of chain here. Okay. This is the Lothran's 1700 watt Falcon. It's the biggest of their range and it's an exceptionally good windlass. And of course it's hooked up to one of the best anchors in the market, the Rocknell, which is good ground tackle. Together with that chain, you're going to have a good anchoring, very safe anchoring setup. This here is the handle for undoing the clutch on here, so you can drop that into there, and opening that, this will then freewheel. That will then freewheel as long as you've got the clutch open here. This is actually the brake. You can see it's a brake band that goes over the drum. At night I like to screw this up nice and tight. So open that to let it off, and this here will let it down. You can control the descent. once that's in by just opening and shutting the clutch. Okay, that's tightening it, that's loosening it. This is for rope only, obviously, and there's your chain. Inside here we have a remote, unbuttoning. There you are, that's up, and that's down. Okay. You also have, as backups, you have 2-foot control, hand control buttons up and down on the starboard forward deck.